Okay, welcome back, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your first session after lunch. That was the slump session, so now we're back in full energy for the next session here. Not that any of those sessions were slumpy sessions, they were great, but you know what I mean. We're all now back to full energy. And in this session, we are going to be talking about something that I'm sure you've all heard the term quite a lot over the last few weeks and months, rewiring government. So how do we rewire government to achieve digital transformation? And I think it's safe to say the context for this is, you know, we've been talking a lot, thanks Anne, about the pace of change, the need to do things differently. When the new cabinet secretary was appointed, the Prime Minister, one of the things that the Prime Minister said about Chris Wormold was, I have asked him to rewire government to help us achieve on our 5 missions. So we're going to be talking in this session about what does that mean. I'm going to follow the same format I've followed for all of the sessions until now. I'm going to introduce our great panel. I'm going to ask them a couple of questions, but then I'm throwing it back to you. So this will be very much your session. Please do ask as many questions and put forward as many comments as you can in this session. We'll make it as interactive as we possibly can. So in terms of our great speakers, we have here Emily Middleton, who is Director General at the Digital Centre Design Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, DCIT, which we've had lots of your colleagues here today, so great to have you with us here, Emily. We've got Carl Hoods, who is Group Chief Digital and Information Officer at the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. We've got Doug Guthrie, who is Chief Technology Officer for one of our partners here today, Digital Modus. And then we have Jackie Legeter, who is Head of Data Platforms and Operations at the Department for Work and Pensions. So another great panel. Thank you all for being here with us. My opening question to all of you, I think, is what does rewiring government mean for you? I'm going to come to you first. What does rewiring government mean for you, Emily? And how different do you think, if we successfully rewire government, how different will it look and feel from what we have now?
Thanks so much, and it's brilliant to be here this afternoon. I think for me, rewiring government, and particularly thinking about it from a sort of digital transformation lens, means 2 things. One, I think, is about a really concerted effort to tackle some of the root causes of the issues that have sort of held us back from systematically and evenly digitally transforming across government, and I'll get onto a bit more of that in a moment. And I think the other is, exactly as you were just touching on, is working together differently across government in a more sort of outcomes-driven way. So I think just to go through those 2 things in a bit more detail, we in DCIT published the State of Digital Government Review in January, which was an effort to really kind of take a bit of a step back and systematically look at, you know, where have we made really fantastic kind of progress over the last sort of 5 or 10 years, and where is there still more to do? And I think in lots of areas we found that too often fantastic work and brilliant services are the result of kind of people working against the system, and it's sort of in spite of the system rather than sort of supported by it. So then we kind of digged a bit further, and we came up with sort of 5 root causes that we think help explain why we haven't kind of gone further. And those are around sort of, firstly, leadership. So we don't consistently still kind of have, or yet have, senior digital service transformation data leaders at the top table of every government department and public sector organisation. The second is around structures, you know, the sort of siloed way that we work, both kind of within and between departments, and some of the sort of cultures and behaviours and incentives that drives. The third is around measurement. We still don't have a consistent way of kind of measuring service performance, service health, organisational performance across sort of digital data and technology, which makes it really hard to work out kind of where we should be sort of systematically putting our focus. And indeed, we still don't really have that kind of consistent service sort of mindset, I think, across government. The fourth was around talent, and I think the thing that really struck me from the report, and you know, we talked to lots of different people right across central government and the wider public sector, as well as doing surveys. The thing that was really striking is that more than anything else, the reason why our digital data technology specialists are kind of struggle working with in government or want to leave is because the operating environment is frustrating, and that came out more than, for instance, pay, even though that's also really, really important, and other issues. And sort of the fifth piece was around funding models, and just the sense that both the way we fund isn't really kind of fit for purpose for how we deliver modern digital services, but also too often, we see the sort of the shiny new things get funding, whereas actually kind of getting funding for kind of persistent sort of teams and products is much more difficult. So I think for me, rewiring the state has got to be about sort of systematically working together to sort of tackle each of those root causes so that we can kind of go further, faster. And then just a really quick note on working together differently. I had the enormous pleasure of spending a couple of days last week in Newcastle with Jackie and her team and some of her colleagues in DWP. And I think we're doing lots sort of together to look at how we can work together with the sort of the new government digital service in DSIT and DWP to work on a whole host of collaborations, having similar conversations with other departments, and really looking at how can we take that kind of spirit and focus of the mission and work together in different ways and collaborate. So I hope more of that to come as well.
Fantastic, thank you. So in terms of what success would look like, really it's covering everything. If we get this right and we manage to rewire, it's going to be very different in terms of the leadership that we have, in terms of the way we work together, in terms of the way we manage our talent, and in terms of the way we measure performance. So actually, that's why it's called rewiring. It's looking at everything, the fundamentals. Thanks so much, Emily. Carl, to what extent would you echo that? Like, how does it feel from the department perspective?
100% agree with everything Emily has said there. I've been back in government for 7 years and recognised all of those challenges and problems. And we're trying to tackle a number of those in isolation. So I think the kind of systems-based approach is the key, right? We need to start thinking about the system as a whole rather than individual component parts of it. So in some degree, that's what we're really trying to do in integrated corporate services as a shared services team, delivering services across multiple departments. We're constantly thinking about the wider system we operate in, taking more of a product mindset to the deliveries that we're doing, and really trying to invert this pyramid that we've seen, which is, at the top, we've got this mass of kind of different things that are happening because everything is unique and special, and the level of commonality and shared services feels quite narrow at times. So we're trying to flip that back the other way and say, actually, we're going to talk about 3 layers of delivery. What can be utility? What's really common and standard that we can all agree on? What's the set of platforms that we can coalesce around and build together across departments, across teams? And then what are the things that are really unique, and keep that to a minimum, but always look to see how we can recycle back into the layers below so that we're always driving that kind of commonality, speed of delivery, cost efficiency, effectiveness, all that kind of stuff.
Fantastic. So for you, in a nutshell, rewiring would flip the triangle.
Yeah, definitely, because we want to spend our time delivering value quickly and delivering outcomes for citizens. And I think we look at that across the entire value chain. Yeah. Often we can have this disconnect between back office, in quotes, and front office. I think we have to join the two things together, because if we've got poor internal systems, then that's going to either take longer or provide a kind of not as an effective citizen-based service. So I think that's why our utility layer is very much like, how do we make that as slick and as smooth as possible and as user-friendly as possible, and then we start moving into the kind of value add when it comes to citizen or external-facing services.
Fantastic, thanks. So Doug, slightly different obviously from the kind of partner or supplier perspective. What would rewiring mean for you if it was done well?
Yeah, and I guess from my perspective, I'm kind of thinking about this over the last kind of couple of years, where Digital Modus has really been kind of working with different digital government departments. And I can kind of feel that some of this is already kind of happening, or I could, maybe I'm kind of fooling myself, but there's areas of this kind of that is improving and getting better. And it's sort of thinking back, one of the early kind of big projects we did with BEIS there was around about the Alternate Energy Grant Funding Scheme 2 years ago, and that was in the peak of the energy crisis, of course. And as we all know, that was one of a series of crises that we're kind of moving through as a country and as public service, through of course, Brexit, the energy crisis, and all these, COVID as well. I nearly forgot COVID. So, but
Had so many crises, it's hard to keep up.
But with that, in that project, it was all about just having to do very rapid kind of delivery, but really doing it kind of with blinkers on, where you're just very focused on that as a relatively point solution, to address a very pressing kind of need. Yeah. And we got that done, and it was very successful, but we didn't have the time to think beyond the kind of policy, kind of the immediate needs, I suppose. Yeah. And then more laterally, where we've kind of got a bit more time and kind of further what's happened, that we're establishing a much kind of broader capability around about this warm homes service that Caro and actually all of the panelists kind of have got some involvement in, I think. And it's really encouraging to see that we can move and be more deliberate about what is reusable, and reusable components, of course, something that comes up all over the place. And I think for me, what would be really helpful would be if we could just become more kind of codified and more deliberate about what we mean by reuse and a reusable component. There's some really good examples in government. There's things like the service standard, the GovUK design system, API catalogs, lots of kind of elements there. But then there's also swathes of good stuff that's been delivered via a framework that means that what's delivered is Crown IP, but nobody knows about it, so nobody really uses it. And having some way that we can understand what is available, all of us can understand what's available, discover what's available, and then use that, pull that off the shelf, as it were.
Okay. Fantastic, thank you. And then finally, Jackie, we've got lots of colleagues from DWP. I've been struck by how many questions we have from colleagues from DWP. So what can they expect from a rewired DWP?
Yeah, thanks. So I agree with everything that everyone said, but I'm going to come at this from a citizen-facing angle, because it's one of the departments that deal with the highest number of citizens in the country. So there's 5 core areas for me for rewiring government. And one is, first and foremost, to join up the citizen experience, to give them a single door to come into government, for it to be absolutely seamless for them. And we have a start of that. We'll have the first thread of that with a one login service. But actually taking that further, we're also going further with identity and creating a single identity. There's more that we can do in terms of payments and validation and things like that. So I think joining up those services and being able to share information and data in a seamless way, and that means laying an awful lot of data foundations so that we have interoperable, reusable data, not just reusable technical components, but actually so that the data is collected and used in a meaningful way that serves citizens. And if we think about the life events of citizens, a birth, a death, a change of address, those are the things that normally trigger an interaction with government in some way or another. And if we start to join up those citizen journeys and those citizen experiences around some of those events, I think that's how we start to rewire government, because we think about our services differently. I think the second area is supporting the best channel for citizens. Sometimes that's digital, sometimes it's not. And we need to lean into that, and we need to ensure that what we're delivering for citizens is that multi-channel experience that allows them to start off in one channel, switch to another channel if it doesn't work for them, or switch back again, and creating the right channel for their need. I think the third thing for me is looking at things like we've got a great blueprint for digital government produced by DSET, and I think for all departments to lean into that framework as a guiding principle. And if we're bringing things together, our white papers, for example, the Get Britain Working white paper published recently, and we'll look at how we deliver that in the context of the digital blueprint for government, will help us by default join up some of those services and lean into some of those common capabilities. And I think the fourth area for me is getting closer to citizens. So we do an awful lot of digital processing in processing centres that are centralised, that become inaccessible. We close down local access for citizens, and sometimes the right channel, particularly where we have complex cases, complex needs for citizens, they just want to speak to somebody. And actually getting to speak to the right person, it's a bit like a game of roulette, isn't it? So being able to provide those getting closer to the citizens, leaning on our local partners and providing local-based services for those who need it and remote services for those who don't, I think is a big challenge. And if we get those remote services right, that should free up the capacity for us to invest more in the local services. And then the fifth area for me is in skills. Digital and data skills, for sure. We need to make sure that we're renewing, refreshing, we're bringing, somebody talked in the previous session about bringing the Gen Zs into the product design, so important. But actually, if we think about in government, the services that we deliver, the way that we deliver those services is going to change hugely. So while we train people to deliver services with empathy, we also need to upskill our operational army with digital skills, because there will be very few roles that won't have some element of using some data in it or using some digital systems in it. So there's an element about upskilling the huge number of people that we have in the operational delivery profession as well as in the DDAT profession. I'm sure that will generate some questions later.
Yeah, Jackie, absolutely. And just to say, I've got a couple of other questions I'm going to put to a couple of members of our panel, but after that I am coming over to you. But I really like what you said there about the multiple channels and getting closer to the citizen, because for some people, I'm doing a lot of helping my parents a lot at the moment, and just they struggle so much with some of the new digital systems. Sometimes it isn't the best route, and we need to get better at both, I think, and we can't overlook that aspect of it as well. So thanks so much. Emily, I want to come back to you and then to Carl before we go over to the audience. So I'm just interested in kind of how you in the centre then support departments, so support people like Carl and Jackie in terms of kind of their transformation work. And also, has that changed that you've moved from Cabinet Office to DCIT? So has that role changed at all?
Yeah, no, great question. And I think, you know, first just to pick up on some of what Jackie was saying, Jackie very helpfully plugged our blueprint, which I do have a copy of. So if you haven't read it already, it's the sort of companion, if you like, to the State of Digital Government report that I mentioned. It's our sort of like, this is sort of what we're doing about it kind of collectively over the longer term. So do take a look. And one of the sort of kickstarters or the things we're just getting on within that is exactly sort of to what Jackie was sort of saying about Get Britain Working, is we want to kind of take the example of people who are managing long-term health conditions, who at the moment sometimes have to deal with 40 different services across 9 different organisations, to your point, really, you know, a mixture of kind of online and offline. And what we're doing at the moment is we've got a new sort of service transformation team together that is doing a bit of a sprint, working collaboratively across government on how we might make that easier and how that might be kind of a bit of a proof of concept to better joining up services. So that's one of the things we're doing. I think in terms of the role of the Government Digital Service, the Digital Centre of Government, I'd say a couple of things. I think in some ways, you know, we're continuing what we've done for a while in terms of sort of acting as the function for digital and data and technology, whether that's in terms of sort of providing standards, providing support, providing guidance, helping kind of boost digital sort of skills and capability, and that, of course, being particularly important given some of the recent announcements that 1 in 10 civil servants by 2030 will be a digital data technology sort of professional. We've obviously still do lots in terms of providing common platforms and services, and I think you've heard some of the future of that work that Chris Bellamy was talking about on stage earlier with the really exciting Generation Alpha work. Obviously, there's more coming in terms of the gov.uk app and wallet later this year. I think the other thing that you'll be seeing us do more is a bit of what I touched on that sort of more service transformation work, better sort of joining up and catalysing where there are really great kind of opportunities for different departments and indeed different levels of government to work differently. And I think one other just quick example of that, and then I'll pause because I'm also keen to get Carl's reflections. It is in terms of what more and how we could work differently with local government. So we're doing a sprint at the moment looking at how GDS can collaborate more indifferently with local government, that's being led by someone from local government, Theo Blackwell, Chief Digital Officer for London, who's come to very kindly join us to spearhead that work.
And I feel like Theo was mentioned in an earlier session as well, so we're bigging Theo up. He better be good.
Excellent.
So he's on our
Great.
final panel session. No, I know. He's really good, Theo. He is going to be speaking on our final session tomorrow. So, Carl, just before we go to the audience, so through the kind of shared service work that you do, are you already seeing an impact of this push to rewire? Like, are you already seeing departments, bodies, agencies coming to you wanting to get involved in this?
Yeah, we've certainly, since State of Digital Government report came out, we've certainly had lots more interest. Some of that is welcome, some of that is slightly less welcome, in that, you know, we're kind of looking at providing a set of core services rather than, can you provide me with 10 developer laptops because I'm struggling with that internally. It's not at that sort of level, right? We need to make sure that we're doing the right thing at the right time. What we're also very mindful of is that, you know, we're in the midst of the DCIT GDS MOG, so effectively, we've got that kind of onboarding activity to do, plus a couple of others that are starting around the side. So we could say yes to everything, but I think this needs to be thought out and planned, and then kind of taken on merit. One thing we're also keen to do is explore where there might be new markets for us to move into, where there are different opportunities that we can then start to build that out. But increasingly, for me, the collaboration point is the key on this. I think we should be sharing a lot more and looking across multiple agencies and multiple sets of organisations. I mean, some of the challenges that have been spoken about, you know, different access abilities from people to services, you know, collectively we can solve that better, I think, than trying to do it individually. So we see more and more of that kind of mission-based approach start to kind of diffuse, infuse, whatever. I know you said infect, but that's probably the wrong word. But
filter through.
Yes, filter through. That's the right one. Come together, and I think that's going to be really powerful. So I think one thing I'm looking for more, I guess, from the centre, as it were, is to help us connect with other people that are doing very similar things, or leverage our expertise where we might have other experience in some of those sectors to draw that out. Because, you know, I'm a non-exec in an integrated care board, which, when we're looking at Dorset as an area, has got all sorts of different geographical and demographic issues to try and help solve some problems with. So again, we can't do that on our own in Dorset. We need to kind of collaborate with others. How do we build those communities?
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Right, time to come over to the audience. Who would like to ask the first question? I am looking to all corners of the room. We've got a very quiet audience. Thank you. We've got a hand down here, and then can we have a second hand up? Yes. So one down here, and then we've got another hand right at the back there for the second question. Thanks. If you keep your hand up till the mic comes to you, that would be great. Thanks.
Sure, yeah. I'm Dr. Shruti Kohli, heading the innovation function in Department of Work and Pensions. Really very, very interesting conversation. Just wanted, I have gone through the blueprint. Like, you know, Emily, when you came over and we really discussed in DWP, I just wanted to understand how much we are planning ahead and how much retrospectively we are thinking of, like, you know, because there are a lot of services, different departments, they have their own plan of action, and, you know, they have really invested a lot. And this is what we really, like, you know, is a kind of a conversation within the department also, like, you know, because if, for example, if we are working a lot in AI as of now, it was not in the roadmap of everyone, and they had their own priorities. So that's the question, like, you know, because we have a blueprint plan, but there are retrospectively a lot of things need to be corrected.
Okay,
so what's the priority?
Thanks. So in case you didn't hear that question, a really great opening question, I think, which is, as we think about this rewiring and doing things differently, there's a balance, isn't there, between, do we just start from now and look ahead, or all of the legacy that we have already of projects that are already underway, how do we bring that into this rewiring exercise? Emily, start with you.
Yeah, great question. And I think really live discussion. I think, you know, there's an opportunity to I think, for everyone to look at, okay, what can we sort of stop, start, continue? And AI is a great example of that, and that will continue to evolve, right? We can't really make a 3-4 year plan right now. We're going to have to sort of stay agile and retain some flexibility. I think, there is an opportunity through this next sort of spending review to really kind of look at that, and that's our sort of process and our mechanism for doing so. And that's also why we've committed in this to sort of publishing a kind of cross-government roadmap later this year that is sort of aligned with the spending review and really gets to the next level of detail of like, okay, if this is the long-term vision, the direction, the sort of scaffolding and North Star of where we're going, exactly what are we committing to delivering collaboratively and then at a department level that will help us take steps towards this vision for citizens, for users over the next sort of 3-4 years. So that's our opportunity, I think, to have those sorts of conversations.
I think just on the back of that, we're in the final year of an SR right now, and we're actually bidding in the next SR. And you're absolutely right, Emily, it's an opportunity. And certainly in DWP, we've been looking at what do we need to address in terms of technical debt to land our modern interoperable data sharing capability so that we can capture data once, use it many times is our kind of mantra. And we need to modernise, we need to move away from legacy systems. And they're always the thing that gets pushed to the bottom of the funding priorities because we're focused on building new user features. And I think we're starting to learn from the value chain that you mentioned, Carl, that actually just leaning into those new citizen-facing features, but then hooking them into the legacy estate doesn't really take us as far forward in our roadmaps and towards the digital blueprint as we would like to be. So there's a real recognition of that and some real opportunity for us to make a strong case for that funding, supported by DCIT colleagues and Treasury in the next SR bid to really try and address some of that technical debt. And that's certainly the approach that we've taken.
And I know our final session today will be looking at kind of mission-led approaches. We might get into the issue of funding because that's so important to this new way of working, isn't it? Doug, just on this question, because you work with lots of different organisations across the public sector, do you think anybody's doing this well?
So the concept of legacy systems, again, is one of these ones that's kind of interesting. And like a lot of the time you kind of come in and, perhaps you're guilty of this, or you use it to refer to any system that isn't the system that you're currently implementing, except for that one that you quite like over here, and I think, with that, it's really trying to kind of be quite specific about what constitutes a legacy system. And also a legacy system, it might be, okay, we're not going to do anything further with it, kind of by definition, but is it impeding us, or is it just something that we can kind of live with for a period of time anyway, so to try and kind of really stack rank and think about which ones are really getting in the way of a transformation and which ones are kind of okay to kind of continue to exist for a period. I think there's a lot of technology can help here with especially kind of data virtualization, and as those sort of technologies come along and you're gaining more options to keep data kind of where it is, but kind of unify that metadata in a sort of central platform without having to do the whole ETL lift and shift as well. And I think that gives room to maneuver with regards to legacy.
Because these are really tricky questions, so using technology to help you through this transition, really important. Thanks. We're going to go to a question at the back. Thanks. Yeah.
Great, thank you. My name is Martin Lugton. I'm the head of product at the Government Digital Service. I really like these descriptions of how we can rewire government, and I'm a big fan of the digital blueprint, so thumbs up for that. I'm interested in why government hasn't done this already, and those underlying factors and what we can do about those factors. So my question is, looking forwards, what do you all think will be the hardest and the most high leverage part of making this rewiring happen over the next few years? Thank you.
I really like this question because I always say I joined the civil service in 1996. And the big thing when I joined was how do we make government more joined up? And here we are, how many decades later, and we're still essentially talking about how we make government more joined up. So I love this question because what are the biggest barriers? What's getting in the way? If it's not technology, which I don't think it is, what are these big barriers to stopping us rewiring government. Carl, I'm going to come to you first.
Thanks. People, in part. If we don't have users, we'd all be happy, wouldn't we? Look, I think we've touched on a number of the topics, right? And they're in the State of Digital Government report. I think they are the big things. You know, we've got a fragmented set of services. We've got a bit of a funding issue. We've got a kind of lack of awareness. It's not quite digital literacy, but it's kind of up there. So that's the biggest challenge from our perspective. I mean, successive years, we've all probably bid as CIOs for we can invest in X and we can achieve Y, and I think the focus has been on, to some degree, traditional policy outcomes without necessarily thinking what the delivery could be from a digital perspective. So I think we've got that kind of hurdle that we're trying to battle against, which for me, there's more we can do. So our digital kind of training and awareness extends beyond our team. We're thinking about, you know, how do we deploy this into policy teams? How do we do more agile delivery? What does it mean for systems thinking, product mindset, etc.? Those kind of areas, which we do. But it feels at the moment it's a bit of an adjunct to some of the other schemes that are out there. So I think we need to look at how do we embed some of this into FLS and SLS and MPLA, all the existing mechanisms that people engage with from a general civil service perspective. Otherwise, we're creating another barrier for entry, because faced with the choice of, do I go on this course or do I go on that other course, it's going to be what's probably most aligned to their profession as a whole. So I think there's more we can do in that sort of area to think about what does that mean for unlocking more of the potential. The funding ones, it's already been worked on. I think, again, there's another whole big system that needs to be thought about and looked at in that sort of space. But, you know, people often say, well, you know, these are really difficult things. So, yeah, they are. And if we don't start, then we're never going to do anything different. So I think we need to kind of capture some of the momentum that we've got, test and pilot wherever we can and start to move forward, because the easy option is to say it's all too difficult and we'll have a long plan. I think we need to take steps now and keep building on those and monitoring our progress. Otherwise, it's easy just to push it into the long grass.
Thanks. Jackie, you're nodding a lot at that.
Yeah, I think there's probably three core areas for me. One is finding the right person. Government is a huge organisation, and actually just finding the right person to talk about what you try to do can take a long time, and it's really challenging. So I think things like the cross-government API catalogue and the National Data Library might go some way to help in that, but some sort of directory on front doors and etc. might help. I think the other thing that concerns me is interoperability across the data sets and a mistrust of, well, my data is better than their data, and how do we use the same data labelling? So it's really important that we come together on standard common metadata models, and we're certainly starting to do a bit of work on that in DWP with ONS and HMRC to start thinking about how might we start to use common metadata across some of our common data items. And I think the third thing is funding, but maybe from a different perspective. Usually, the department that has to invest the most isn't the department who benefits the most from that change. And I'll give you a prime example of that. A couple of years ago, we had an approach from the NHS to share some real-time benefit information with the NHS free prescription service. And that was going to save them £240 million a year on fraud and error and cost recovery for prescriptions. What did DWP get out of that? Not very much. So how could DWP invest in our technology to open up a real-time API that would be made available to every pharmacy in the country and every online pharmacy? So a 24/7 API, that doesn't come free. And the NHS had no investment case for it, for our costs. So we were fortunate that we had a CDIO that was willing to put an investment, because for the greater good of the citizen, shall we say, the DWP and the British citizen could benefit from this. So we invested in it, but that's quite rare. We often see cases of sharing data across government where there just isn't the investment available. There's no shared benefit case. There's no shared pot of money. And that might be a game changer for us and it may also be an incentive for us to solve problems together. If there's a shared pot of money that we can prove that there's a real case, £240 million a year saving is real money. Think how many nurses that is a real saving. So where we can really document those savings and have a strong case, not to be perturbed by the money.
And that's what I think that's what it really means about breaking down the silos and different funding models, doesn't it? And the mission-led approach should hopefully facilitate some of that change.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a great example of that mission-based approach and the systems-based approach, because one thing in one area could positively impact another, but at the moment we're kind of all geared up towards the individual departments. And I think we need, maybe we just need to find those examples where we can start to foster more of that collaboration. I mean, interoperability is another thing. During COVID, interoperability, there was a whole working group of us trying to get together to figure out how that worked, and then that slowly kind of petered out, which is where I kind of said earlier, I think we need to keep these things going and measure them and measure the impact, and then take a conscious decision to stop it if it's achieved its outcomes or it's not quite getting there, rather than we get distracted with the next thing that we've got to do and move along. So
because there was lots of collaboration during COVID where the benefits of doing it ended up in another department from the one that was providing the data and the information. Doug, you wanted to come in?
No, I was going to, kind of completely agree, and also kind of curse Jackie for that. Was I completely agree with that point, and one I was going to kind of it's not even so much that one department is doing all of the work for somebody else's perceived gain, but it's kind of can even be more extreme, where that the department that's doing the work, that's providing that API or providing that service, is also exposing themselves to risk as well. So you go, I'm providing this API, and if I give bad information, or I've done all this work, and if I give bad data or erroneous data, and there's always a risk, and in fact, and perhaps an inevitability that you're going to do that some of the time, that you're taking on a risk for no reward. And you can really see that. And with for example, this low-income verification thing that we're looking at right now, where again it's DWP, Treasury providing information that would then be consumed by or used by DESNZ, and then ultimately to help people who are in receipt of benefits get home energy grants much more easily, and also to help local authorities to avoid having to do that work. It was really gratifying, like Emily's point about doing the outreach with the local authorities as well, because I think that's something that really could be more of that would be really useful and valuable.
Right. So before I come to the audience, Emily, why haven't we done this already?
It's such a great, I want to know what Martin thinks, but I'll ask him later. But I think, look, my perspective on that is, I think obviously a lot of these issues are hard and entrenched, but I suppose that we've been reflecting a lot on what's changed. And I think for me, we do have a particular moment in time where I think the gauntlet has been thrown down to us collectively as a profession across government. I think the fact that 1 in 10, the aspiration is for 1 in 10 civil servants to be digital data sort of tech specialists by 2030. I think that should send a really clear signal to all of us that we are very much seen as a key kind of driver of sort of civil service reform, which I think is exciting. But I think the other thing that's different is that we almost don't have a choice. I mean, there isn't much money available, and we therefore have sort of two options, really. So maybe there is one. One is to very incrementally reduce and sort of shave off what we do at the moment, and we know that's just going to exacerbate all of the issues, with particularly around not enough investment in legacy remediation that Jackie and others have been talking about. Or we can use this as a moment to really take a step back and to try and kind of reinvent what we're doing and work in quite a dramatically sort of different way. So I think that's at least the moment of opportunity that we've kind of got in front of us.
And I think probably, we'll come in. If you bring the mic here, there's another question down the front here in the meantime. But we've probably got about a third of the people in the room who aren't digital or data professionals. And that message around the importance of technology and that we want more people to be technologists. So obviously it's exciting if you're already in that space. But what would your message be for people who aren't in one of those professions?
I mean, I think anyone who isn't and who's here is already self-selecting. So I think that's already a good sort of step forward. I think there's so much that other professions, and particularly sort of policy colleagues, as well as colleagues in finance and in HR, can kind of do to kind of work with us. And I think whether that's from really thinking about what are the kind of products and tools that you can kind of adopt, whether it's some of those that the AI incubator is sort of developing to sort of not just to do your job a bit more efficiently, but actually to take quite a different approach to developing policy and working with operational and digital colleagues in a much more agile, iterative, outcomes-focused, user-centred way. I think that's really the opportunity. And I know that there are teams and pockets of activity going on around this across government, but how can we make that a bit more systematic and sort of mainstream it into those professions? I think there's really exciting opportunities there. So I'd say, you know, if you're looking at that or working on it, then more power to your elbow.
Thanks. So we've got a question down here, and if you've got another question, please put your hand up and we'll get the microphone. Okay, so we can share the microphone here, and then there's a gentleman down there. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, it's John Fitzpatrick from Government Digital Service. I think there's some great examples that you're talking about, and the specifics where you bring out the API being used for benefits, for health, is one example. I think what we're doing to look at the totality of benefit that can be created just by doing that capability. So, for example, in justice, we used exactly the same API to build out a service that was going to enable prison visits and pay for those sorts of benefits. So anywhere where there's a necessity for government to know if you're on a benefit, qualifying benefit or not, gives you the total benefit. Now, we're really lucky that you had a CDIO that was pragmatic and saw the big picture in government. But I think to really land this, if we had the totality of benefits, and you can't always see them in advance, it's when we know that's there, it creates the creativity in the department to go and reuse that capability. So my question really is about how do we kind of look at the totality of benefit and work backwards from that into the services that we design and co-design.
So I really like this. So you might have pockets of this going on and people can see the bit, but how do we kind of put that business case for the holistic? This has a huge benefit if we can do it across the civil service. Any thoughts on that? How do we get that message and that measured?
I think it's a really, really good ask, to be honest. And I think that certainly within DWP, for example, one of our most common used APIs is a real-time benefit check, for exactly what you said. So we know that it's our most common. We know that that API is being called more than 1 million times a day. That's 1 million sub-processes taken out of operations that would historically have been a phone call or an email or a fax, for those of you that are a bit older as well. So taking that out in terms of, are we measuring all of that? Not to that level, absolutely not. But there is something about, we know how many times that is being called. So we know the benefit of that internally. How we might start to feed that into, it comes back to your point, Emily, about how we report success, how we report our successes and how we account for our deliverables. So we can say, yeah, this has been a really successful API. We're calling it more than 1 million times a day. But actually, if we were feeding that into a bigger narrative around the so what is that saving? And then that might make us think about if we have other common bits of data that we're looking for example, income data from HMRC, savings data from open banking, those types of things that could really make a difference to us. We've got something embedded in a hard example where we know it's real and we know it's real value. So adding a kind of financial lens to that value chain, I think, might be helpful in collating that at a centre of government, maybe something that's helpful to us.
Fab, thank you. We've got 2 questions. We've probably got time for 2 questions. So we've got a question here and then the gentleman at the back. Yep. Do we leave the microphone here? No, there's Anne running. I'm going to... Sorry, Anne. Give you your exercise there. Thanks.
Thank you. I've got a range of questions, but I'm going to try and just select
just one. Thanks.
Yes, I
Sorry.
know. I think going along the kind of DDAT focus and then kind of the other professions, I'm someone from one of the other professions and the era of kind of the generalist versus being a professional. When reading the kind of 10% of the civil service, I actually think there should be a greater focus on just upskilling everyone. And my heart sank a little bit when it was is it 10%, is it 12%? Because my other half is a software engineer, and there seems to be this bridging of the gap, which is very, very difficult, which also links into the number of times that I don't think there's enough technical experts in things like ExCos in our organisations and the voice that there is there. So I suppose my question to the panel is, how much greater focus do you think there should be, whether we call them professions, whether we call them general civil servicing, whatever we call that, rather than just sort of creating this other of the DDAT?
So again, I think a really nice question in that even if you do want to have, say, a target in particular for DDAT roles, to what extent do we need digital literacy across all of our professions. Emily, I'm going to come to
I
you.
couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think you're spot on. We've got to do both, and we've got to do both in parallel with the same sort of energy and vigour. Really interesting, I think, what you said around leadership. I agree. I think we've got to get that right in organisations to sort of create the space and the culture for everybody to do that. And that's why, I'll do another plug, that's why in the blueprint we've kind of got a commitment or an expectation that we're setting, if you like, that all kind of departments, major public sector organisations have a digital data or service transformation leader, depending on what's most appropriate, on both their excos and their non-exec boards within the next couple of years. And I hope that that will really sort of help drive some of that. There obviously is already some great sort of training out there that's available to all civil servants and that's very much sort of designed to basically provide some of the fundamentals of digital transformation too. So I think that's worth checking out. But yeah, very much agree.
Thanks. And then just the final question at the back, because we've probably got time for just that one. Yeah, thanks.
It's Michael Egglesall from Cabinet Office here. Broadly, my question was going to be similar to the one just asked, so I will make it a bit narrower. Should there be minimum standards of digital competence for every civil servant, and should that be significantly higher for those in the SCS?
Okay, so minimal standards. Jackie, I'll come to you. I'm going to go this way down the panel for all of your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think first of all, we're all professionals as professional civil servants. So I think we shouldn't say if you're not in DDAT, you're not a professional, because you are. You may be a different type of professional, but you're still a professional. And yeah, I do think that in the future, every role in government will involve some form of digital literacy. And I do think we need to tackle that and we need to lean into that. That doesn't mean if you don't know digital now that you can't learn it. It's about having a capacity to learn. And particularly in some of our frontline services where empathy is more important than knowing how to use a computer. But nevertheless, if you're out doing visiting officer or providing local services, the likelihood is you'll have some form of iPad or some form of technology in your hand. You will want to become data-driven in our mission, and so you want to have access to data. How will you do that if you don't understand how to use the technology? So I think there is a barrier to doing those operational professions in the future if we don't upskill now, if we don't start to build some of those core principles around digital and data foundations. And one of the approaches we've taken in DWP is we've stood up across our operational arm. We've got about 80,000 people, and we've stood up 100 digital champions. And those digital champions are leaning in and doing kind of back to classroom type digital training, because it's not all about the online, right? Back to the classroom, and they've ran over 1,000 of them. So we've had lots of success through those, and I think we need to do that. We need to go back to grassroots levels, because we are digital experts. We forget that in our operational communities, in our policy communities, in our legal communities, there's loads of different specialisms. So we need to start building that ground-up understanding and that foundational digital awareness.
I really like the way you put it there, is that, yes, you might need everybody to have kind of basic digital skills, but you can't then say, that doesn't supersede empathy and things like that. And interesting conversation about, can you teach digital professionals empathy in the same way you can teach empathetic people digital skills. So it's kind of all, we have to think about all of these things. Doug, over to you.
So, well, as somebody who's not a civil servant, I'm not going to weigh in on the argument about minimum competencies too much. But I guess what I will say is, like, in Digital Modus, we're, of course, primarily technologists. We're a technology supplier. But what we always find and always emphasize is for us to do our work well and to deliver well on our projects, we put a great store in understanding what the process is, what the customer is kind of looking for, what's the policy context, and trying to absorb as much of that as we possibly can. And the converse is also true. When we can work with the policy colleagues and they can can absorb some of the, in our case Salesforce, but that technology context and become conversant and au fait, and we can speak each other's languages, it always is to the success of the project.
Definitely a lot that the professions could learn from each other.
Yeah, so I think there is a lot of this bleeding together, and as you say, it's maybe not that 10% of the service are digital specialists, or maybe that is, but maybe the remaining, 90% are doing digital 10% of the time, or
Yeah.
whatever it is. Yeah.
Carl, and then Emily, the last word will come to you.
Yeah, so I think there needs to be, but the right sort of competency. Not everybody needs to know how to write Hello World in Python, that kind of stuff. But I think so. It will depend on those roles. But I think kind of the mindset type approach there, and that works at all levels. I'm a non-exec in 3 different organisations. I am the lone digital person in a room full of accountants. I'd like to, no offence to anybody who works in the finance profession, but I'd like to see there being more of a balance in terms of that. Certainly, how do we help them think in a different way to deliver the outcomes in a different way?
Thanks. And Emily, the last word to you, but I was just wondering if this question around should everyone have minimum standard, it's almost a question that's going to be for any job in any sector, isn't it, going forward? It won't be specific to the public sector.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I think look, there might be some exceptions and sort of niche areas of operations or policy making where it's less critical, but broadly, I think you're right. I think that's the sort of direction of travel that we want to move in, which is sort of potentially really exciting. I do think we've got to think about the sort of the carrot though as well, if you like, of the stick. So this is only really going to work not if we get hundreds of thousands of people to feel like they have to sort of tick certain boxes on a checklist, but that they actually see this as a really as an enabler in a way that they can do their jobs and serve the public kind of better, faster, in a more satisfying and an effective way. And I think we've got to keep that in mind and make sure that those stories and that sense of possibility and opportunity comes through, and that we do this in a bit, as Jackie was saying, in a way that also meets people where they're at and gives a whole range of different ways that people can kind of develop their skills and learning. I think that's super important.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Again, another really interesting session. Please join me in a round of applause for our great speakers. And just to say, in terms of what happens next, so you have a short coffee break now. If you could be back here, though, at 5 to 4 for our, we actually have one more keynote address, so 5 to 4, and then we will have our final session where we have another really international panel, including we have the head of the civil service from Nigeria on that panel, where we will be talking all about mission delivery, so it follows on very nicely from this. And then even more exciting news than that for some of you, there will be a reception after that last panel, a drinks reception outside and some networking opportunities for you. So please do hang around for that reception if you can. But you have about 15, 20 minutes now for your final coffee break of the day, and we'll see you back here at 5 to 4. Thanks, everybody.